My name is Camille Foster, and I am 34 years old. Last week, I walked across the stage to receive my law school diploma after 6 grueling years of working full-time during the day, studying at night, raising 2 children, and holding together a household that never truly appreciated what I was doing. I stood there in my cap and gown, surrounded by cheers and camera flashes, but none of them were for me. I had 5 seats reserved in the audience, one for my husband, 2 for our children, and 2 for my mother and brother. All 5 were empty. Just as I stepped off the stage, diploma in hand, my phone buzzed. 45 missed calls. One message from my husband: "We need to talk. Urgently." You'd think that would be enough of a punch in the gut, but it gets worse. They didn't miss my graduation because of an emergency. They missed it because they all went to a barbecue. A backyard party thrown by my older brother Zach to celebrate the 10th anniversary of his real estate company. There were fireworks, champagne, a live band. My husband even helped set up the sound system, never once mentioning the overlap until it was too late to change anything. My children were there too, laughing and playing by the pool while their mother, the one who cooked for them, cleaned up after them, and burned the candle at both ends for years, was standing alone being handed a degree she nearly lost her sanity trying to earn. I know what you might be thinking. Maybe they had a good reason. Maybe there was a misunderstanding. Let me stop you right there. I told everyone about this graduation 6 months in advance. I printed invitations. I emailed reminders. I booked a dinner reservation, paid a deposit, even arranged a hotel room for my mother who lives out of town. They knew. They just didn't care enough. Or rather, they cared more about Zach and his barbecue. Zach, the golden child, the entrepreneur, the man who can do no wrong in my mother's eyes. He's charming and loud and always knows how to steal the spotlight. He's also the same man who once borrowed $5,000 from me and never paid it back. But that's another story. My husband Luke used to say he admired my ambition. That was back when I first enrolled in law school. Now he calls it an obsession. He says I'm never home, that the kids miss me, that everything has fallen on him. And maybe that's true, but what he never says is that I did this for us, for our future, for stability, for respect. So when I stood alone in that crowded auditorium scanning the crowd for faces that never arrived, something inside me shifted. I had sacrificed so much sleep money, relationships, even parts of myself I can never get back, just to be seen, to be acknowledged. But in that moment, I realized something painful and liberating at once. Maybe I would never be seen by them. Maybe I had to stop begging for their presence and start demanding my worth. From the outside, our family looked perfectly ordinary. We lived in a modest 2-story home in a quiet suburb of Milwaukee. The grass was always trimmed, the kids' bikes leaned against the porch, and every Sunday morning we walked to the local diner for pancakes. But beneath that surface was a storm that never quite made the news. I worked 5 days a week as a legal assistant for a public defense office where we handled cases most private firms wouldn't touch. I was the one staying late to sort files for abused women, fighting for custody, or undocumented workers trying to avoid deportation. Then I would head straight to night classes at Wisconsin Law School, barely seeing my kids awake except for weekends. My son David is 10, my daughter Maya is 7. They're smart and kind, but lately distant. They started rolling their eyes when I mentioned court or study groups. Luke, my husband, told me I was becoming someone else. "You used to be fun," he'd say. "Now all you care about is your law degree." But what he never seemed to understand was that this degree wasn't about status. It was survival. I had seen too many women trapped in lives they couldn't legally escape. I wasn't going to be one of them. Still, I tried to hold it all together. I packed school lunches before the sun came up. I answered client calls from the bathroom at school. I attended parent-teacher conferences during my lunch breaks and typed court memos while stirring spaghetti sauce. All of it with one goal: earn that degree and become a full-fledged attorney who could finally make decisions, not just follow instructions. But the more I pushed forward, the more I noticed something shifting at home. Luke stopped waiting up for me. He'd fall asleep on the couch with a beer in hand and the TV on. The kids stopped telling me about their school projects. They'd go to their dad for help. I was the woman behind the laptop, the one who missed soccer games and birthday parties, always with a textbook in her bag. I told myself it was temporary. I believed that once I graduated, once I was earning more, once I had weekends free again, everything would fall back into place. But that's not how it works with emotional distance. It doesn't wait politely in the corner. It builds a home inside your marriage and quietly rearranges the furniture. 3 months before graduation, Luke sat me down and said, "Camille, the kids don't even ask where you are anymore." I nodded and said I'd try to be more present, but the truth was, I had no space left. Every minute I carved for myself came at a cost. What hurt the most was realizing that my sacrifice, this back-breaking effort to build something better, was invisible to the very people it was meant to help. When I got the email confirming my graduation date, I printed it out and stuck it on the fridge. I sent digital invites. I even recorded a voice note for my mom because she never reads texts. "I really want you there," I told them all. "This is a huge deal for me." Everyone said yes. Luke kissed me on the forehead and said, "Wouldn't miss it for the world." I clung to that sentence like it was a promise. And it was, until it wasn't. My relationship with my family had always been strained, but not in the way that people typically think of dysfunction. There was no yelling, no slamming doors or ultimatums. Instead, there was silence dismissal and a quiet erasure of anything that made me feel like I mattered. My older brother Zach was the crown jewel of the Foster family. He owned a chain of real estate offices throughout Wisconsin, drove a Tesla, and dated women who looked like they belonged on magazine covers. Our mother Helen treated him like the sun around which we all revolved. When I got my first promotion as a senior paralegal, she forgot to call. When Zach closed a 6-figure deal, she threw him a dinner party. It was always like that. He was the achiever, the charmer. I was the responsible one, the fixer. The one who drove our mother to her medical appointments, paid her electric bill during the winter of 2019 when Zach's cash flow was tight, and kept receipts of everything because I knew deep down no one would remember. I thought I could tolerate it. After all, not every family is perfect. But the older I got, the more the favoritism turned from frustrating to corrosive. When I started law school, I hoped they'd see me differently, that maybe being the first person in the family to pursue a graduate degree would finally earn their respect. Instead, my mom said, "Why not just stick with being a paralegal? It's stable. You already make good money." And Zach laughed when he heard the news. "Law school? That sounds like a lot of debt for a fancy title." He always said things like that, little daggers coated in sarcasm. When I told Luke how much it bothered me, he shrugged. "That's just Zach. You know how he is." Yes, I did. He was manipulative, charming when it served him, dismissive when it didn't. And everyone let him get away with it. Still, I kept trying. Every holiday, I sent gifts to my nieces and nephews. Every birthday, I made the call, even if mine went unanswered. I told myself I was doing the right thing, that being the bigger person mattered. But I started to see how my children were absorbing those dynamics. They watched as I accepted being left out. They watched as I cleaned up after family gatherings I hadn't been invited to help plan. They saw how I always gave more than I received, and slowly they stopped expecting anything different. When my graduation approached, I made the mistake of hoping again. I envisioned my mother clapping from the crowd, maybe even crying. I imagined Zach patting me on the back and saying, "I underestimated you." I imagined Luke holding my hand while our kids cheered. But reality had its own script. 2 weeks before the ceremony, Zach sent out a mass text announcing his big barbecue bash. Celebrating 10 years of real estate domination, he wrote, "Come hungry, come thirsty, bring your suits. We're grilling and chilling all day," I replied privately. "Zach, you know my graduation is that day. Can you reschedule?" His answer came within seconds. "Sorry, sis, locked everything in already. Vendors, band, guest list. You should come by after your thing." After my thing. Like it was a hobby, like I was receiving a bowling trophy, not a law degree. I didn't respond. Instead, I called my mom. "You're still coming to graduation, right?" She hesitated. "Well, you know how rare it is to have the whole family together. Zach says even Aunt Carol is flying in." "I've been planning this for months," I said. "I booked your hotel." "Sweetie, don't make this a guilt trip," she replied. "Zach has a lot of people depending on him. He's doing something big." I hung up without saying goodbye. My hands were shaking. I turned to Luke, hoping for comfort, but he looked away. "The kids are kind of excited about the barbecue," he said. "Their cousins will be there. It'll be fun." That's when I realized it wasn't just Zach or my mom. It was all of them. They had already chosen what mattered more. The days leading up to my graduation felt like standing on train tracks watching the headlights approach and hoping somehow the train would stop. I moved through the week in a daze attending my final classes, submitting last assignments, picking up my cap and gown, all while pretending everything was normal. But it wasn't. My stomach twisted every time I walked past the fridge and saw the printed graduation date still hanging there, surrounded by fading magnets and unanswered hope. Luke grew more distant. He stopped pretending. When I asked him if he could help me pick up a dress I had altered for the ceremony, he said he was swamped with sound check times for Zach's party. When I asked if the kids had written the little notes for the graduate tribute board, he said, "Oh, I forgot to tell you. Maya said she'd rather draw a card for Uncle Zach." I didn't argue. I didn't scream. I just nodded and wrote a check for the seamstress. The night before the ceremony, I sat alone in our bedroom, laying out everything I would need: heels, the navy blue dress I bought 3 months earlier, with the subtle neckline and classic tailoring, my gown, my cords, and my law school sash. It should have been a moment of triumph. But instead, I sat there listening to the sound of laughter downstairs as Luke and the kids practiced a playlist for the barbecue. They didn't know I was crying. I'd gotten good at hiding it. At around 10, I walked downstairs, pausing at the base of the stairs. "Hey," I said quietly. Luke looked up from his laptop. "I just want to confirm I said you're coming tomorrow." He hesitated. "Camille, I want to be honest. The kids really want to go to Zach's. They've been talking about it for weeks. I told them maybe we'd go to the ceremony for an hour, then head over. Zach's got a magician coming for the kids, and—" "A magician?" I interrupted, my voice hollow. "You're choosing a magician over watching your wife graduate law school." "Come on, it's not like that," he said. "It's not like this is medical school or something. You've been studying forever and it's just a piece of paper. The kids don't even understand what it means." That's when I knew. There was no saving it. I was alone in this. "Don't bother coming," I said. "Enjoy the party." He didn't fight me. He just nodded and went back to his screen. The next morning, I dressed in silence. No one came upstairs. No one asked to see me in my gown. I curled my hair, applied my makeup with shaking hands, and checked my phone. Nothing. No good luck messages. No apologies. No change of heart. I took one last look at myself in the mirror, smiled as best I could, and left. The auditorium was buzzing with families and flowers and balloons. I checked in, found my seat, and sat down, surrounded by students hugging their parents. I kept my eyes on the stage. I refused to cry. When they called my name, Camille Foster Juris, Doctor, I stood up, walked across the stage, accepted my diploma, and smiled for the camera. There was polite applause, then silence. I walked back to my seat, my heart heavy with a truth I had been avoiding for years. They never saw me. They never would. And just as I sat down, my phone buzzed again in my lap. A single message from Luke. "We need to talk. Urgently." Then I saw the number. 45 missed calls. I left the ceremony before the last speech ended. I couldn't sit there another minute surrounded by families celebrating while mine posed for selfies around a barbecue grill. I walked out the side exit of the auditorium, blinking against the sharp afternoon light, clutching my diploma like it was the last thing tethering me to reality. I reached my car, opened the door, and finally checked my voicemail. Luke had called me 45 times in the span of 2 hours. His voice was frantic, rushed. "Camille, it's David. He fell into the fire pit. It's bad. We're at County General. Please come." My hands shook as I dropped the phone on the passenger seat. David, our son, the one who had begged to wear his new sneakers to my graduation, the one I hadn't seen that morning because he left early with Luke. I threw the car into gear and sped out of the parking structure, my heart pounding so loudly it drowned out every thought. 15 minutes later, I pulled into the hospital's emergency lot and ran inside, still wearing my graduation gown. The front desk nurse directed me to Bay 4. I flung the curtain back and froze. David was lying on the bed, his right arm wrapped in bandages, his face pale and tear-streaked. Luke stood beside him, guilt written across every line of his face. Zach and my mother were there too, sipping coffee from paper cups like this was an inconvenient intermission in their party. "Mom," David whispered when he saw me. I rushed to his side and took his uninjured hand in mine. "I'm here," I said. "I'm right here, baby." The attending physician came in and introduced herself. "Your son has second-degree burns on his forearm. He tripped near the open fire pit. Luckily, he pulled back quickly, but we're keeping him overnight for observation and pain management." I nodded mechanically, trying to keep my voice steady as I asked questions. Luke hovered behind me, saying nothing. My mother stepped forward. "He was just playing with his cousins. It was an accident." I didn't answer. Zach shrugged. "I told the caterers to move the fire pit away from the kids, but they didn't listen. You know how these things go." These things, like my son, was a line item in a party planning mishap. I stood up and turned to Luke. "You took them there, knowing it wasn't safe." "Camille," he began, "he just tripped. He was running around. I wasn't watching for 1 second because you were on stage with the band," I snapped. "I saw the live stream. You were singing while our son burned." He flinched but didn't deny it. My mother placed a hand on my shoulder. "Sweetie, don't make this about blame. David's okay. That's what matters." I turned slowly. "Don't you dare tell me what this is about. I graduated law school today. None of you were there. And now I'm here in a hospital while you all act like this is some unavoidable accident. It's not. It's negligence." Silence fell over the room. Zach coughed into his sleeve. "Let's not turn this into some legal thing." "Why not?" I said, my voice low and sharp. "That's what I do now. Remember, I'm a lawyer. Or didn't you hear that part between barbecue rounds?" Luke looked up, desperation creeping into his voice. "Camille, please. We need to talk. We need to figure this out." "Not now," I said. "I'm staying with David. The rest of you can leave." My mother looked hurt. Zach raised his hands in mock surrender. "Fine. We'll give you space." They shuffled out, leaving just me, my son, and the muted beeping of hospital machines. I sat beside his bed and held his hand until he drifted to sleep, then stared at the wall and realized something that chilled me. My son's injury wasn't just a tragic accident, it was a consequence. A direct result of everyone choosing to celebrate someone else instead of supporting the person who had spent 6 years building a future for this family. And I knew right then I wasn't going to let it slide. That night, I didn't leave David's side. I sat upright in the hospital chair gown, wrinkled makeup, smudged diploma, still in the back seat of my car where I'd tossed it. The quiet hum of machines, the occasional beeping, the soft shuffling of nurses checking vitals. It was the only kind of silence I could tolerate because it wasn't empty. It was filled with care, urgency presence. Around 3 a.m., I stepped into the hallway to stretch my legs and grab some water. That's when I noticed one of the attending nurses watching me with a curious expression. She approached slowly, holding a clipboard. "You're Camille Foster, right?" I nodded. "I thought I recognized you," she said. "I read your name on the intake chart and wondered. I took your community law class last year at the Outreach Center. You were amazing." I blinked, caught off guard. "Thanks," I said quietly. "Congratulations on graduating. I saw the list in the newsletter." I managed a weak smile. Not everyone did. She looked at me carefully. "Sometimes the people who know your worth aren't the ones closest to you." That landed harder than I expected. I went back into David's room and sat down with a new weight in my chest. Not grief, not anger, but a kind of resolve that only comes after the last string has snapped. The next morning, a social worker came by for the standard post-injury protocol. She asked David a few gentle questions, took notes, and then turned to me. "Do you live with your husband?" "Yes," I said. "For now." She nodded slowly, sensing the weight behind the answer. "And who was supervising when the accident happened?" I hesitated, then answered clearly. "My husband." "But he was performing at the time." "The fire pit was unattended." She raised her eyebrows, jotted that down, and handed me a copy of the incident report. "If you'd like to follow up or request a safety inspection of the event space, here's where to start." I didn't tell her the event space was my brother's backyard. I just thanked her and tucked the paper into my bag. When David was discharged the next afternoon, I helped him dress, signed the paperwork, and wheeled him out to the car. Luke was waiting in the lobby, eyes puffy, clearly having slept in his clothes. "I'm sorry," he said before I could speak. "For everything." I didn't answer. I opened the passenger door, helped David in, buckled his seatbelt with one arm while holding his small, cast-covered hand with the other. When I stood up again, I looked Luke dead in the eyes. "We'll talk later. I need to take care of him first." At home, I settled David onto the couch, set up a tray with his favorite snacks, and turned on cartoons. Maya stayed mostly in her room, avoiding me. I didn't blame her. Luke hovered unsure of where to stand. That evening, after David had fallen asleep, I sat at the dining table with my laptop. I pulled up Zach's business records, scanned through recent social media posts, and noted every tagged photo from the party. I clicked through images of champagne bottles, a fireworks show, a giant branded cake with Zach Foster properties embossed in edible gold. Then I found what I was looking for, a tagged photo showing the fire pit with children gathered nearby. No safety barrier, no adult supervision. I took a screenshot. The next step was obvious. I filed a formal complaint with the state regulatory agency. Zach's company had used public donations meant for housing development for low-income families to partially fund his event. The vendor invoices were available online and the names matched. I submitted my report anonymously, attaching screenshots, digital receipts, and eyewitness statements I'd quietly collected from others who attended the barbecue. I wasn't just mad anymore. I was done playing the nice sister. I'd spent a lifetime swallowing slights, rationalizing insults, accepting invisibility. But now I was a lawyer, and they were going to see exactly what that meant. The complaint I filed triggered an investigation faster than I expected. Within a week, the state's Department of Consumer Protection reached out to verify several of the claims, and I supplied them with additional documentation through a secure channel. I didn't tell anyone what I was doing, not even Luke. He was too busy trying to rebuild whatever connection he thought we still had, making pancakes for the kids vacuuming without being asked, leaving little notes like, "Let's talk when you're ready." I wasn't ready. Not because I needed more time to cool off, but because I was done talking. I was acting now. Meanwhile, Zach's social media presence started to shift. He removed the barbecue photos, then posted a vague update about being temporarily stepping back to focus on family and faith. It was the kind of performative repentance that made my skin crawl. But what made my blood truly boil came a few days later when a neighbor sent me a screenshot of a local news article. The headline read, "Real Estate Mogul Under Investigation for Misuse of Public Funds." Zach was pictured smiling, wearing sunglasses, giving a thumbs up beside his signature branded tent. The article listed the nature of the complaint, citing anonymous sources and whistleblower documentation. But the most important detail was in the last paragraph. Sources confirm the event in question involved an injury sustained by a minor, prompting scrutiny into the safety and regulatory compliance of the gathering. That was David, my son. My child burned while adults drank champagne. Luke saw the article too. That night, after the kids were in bed, he approached me in the kitchen. "Was that you?" he asked quietly. "You filed the complaint?" I didn't deny it. I looked him in the eye and said, "Of course I did." He sat down hard on a stool. "Do you know what you've started?" "A reckoning," I said, "and I'm just getting started." He looked at me like he didn't recognize me. Maybe he didn't. Maybe he only knew the version of me that apologized for taking up space. The one who cooked dinner with one hand and typed legal briefs with the other. The one who asked permission to be respected. That woman was gone. A few days later, I got a call from a senior attorney at my office. She had seen my name attached to some preliminary legal filings and wanted to talk. I braced myself for disciplinary questions, but instead, she surprised me. "We're putting together a case for the district attorney's office based on that investigation," she said. "Your documentation was solid. If you're comfortable, I want you on it. As an intern attorney. This could be your first real courtroom case." I said yes before she finished the sentence. That same week, Luke received a letter from Child Protective Services. It was a formal notification that due to negligence at the barbecue resulting in injury and based on witness statements confirming lack of supervision, he was temporarily restricted from sole custody of the children. The kids would remain with me under court oversight. He stood in the living room holding the letter like it was on fire. "You're taking them from me." "No," I said, "your actions did that. I'm just protecting them." Like I always have. He didn't argue. There was no defense left. Zach, meanwhile, went silent. His company took down their website for maintenance. Rumors swirled about investors pulling out. I didn't care about the downfall of his brand. What mattered was that for the first time in my life, the people who had dismissed me were being held accountable. I wasn't just the girl in the corner anymore. I was the one holding the mirror up, showing them who they really were. The weeks that followed were quieter in the way a battlefield is quiet after the smoke clears. The damage had been done, but the silence carried weight. Zach didn't call, didn't message. My mother left a voicemail filled with disappointment, not over what had happened to David, but over what I had done to tear the family apart. I didn't return her call. I was too busy rebuilding something far more important myself. The first morning after Luke's custody restriction took effect, I woke up to sunlight pouring into my bedroom and silence downstairs. David and Maya were still sleeping. I made coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and opened a folder I hadn't touched since graduation, my new class schedule for bar prep and internship rotation. I reviewed it carefully, not as someone sneaking time between chores or waiting for approval, but as someone fully in control of her next step. At work, I began assisting with the case against Zach's company. I couldn't represent the state formally yet, but I provided material support. I drafted documents, outlined witness timelines, and prepared visual exhibits showing the misappropriation of funds. My supervising attorney complimented my focus, but it wasn't just focus. It was fury channeled through precision. It was pain turned into power. At home, things began to shift in small but meaningful ways. Maya started lingering in the kitchen while I cooked. David, still in his cast, asked me to help him with a school project, something about heroes. He wanted to write about women in law. I asked him if he meant Ruth Bader Ginsburg or someone like that. No, he said. I mean you. That night, I cried for the first time in weeks, not out of sadness but release. For all the recognition I had begged for from adults who never saw me, it took a 10-year-old boy with a bandaged arm to remind me what being seen truly felt like. A few days later, my supervising attorney pulled me aside and handed me an envelope. Inside was an official offer letter, an associate attorney position upon passing the bar. Full-time. Benefits. A desk with my name on it. I accepted on the spot. I went home that evening, pulled out my diploma from the back seat of the car where it had remained untouched since graduation, and hung it on the living room wall. I didn't wait for a frame. I used tape. I wanted it there, visible, undeniable. Maya walked past, stopped, and looked up at it. It's pretty, she said. Is that your lawyer thing? It's my lawyer thing. I nodded. Can I show my friends? You can show whoever you want, I said. And I meant it. A week later, Luke asked to meet. We sat in the same booth we used to visit on Sunday mornings before the distance took over. He looked tired, smaller. I read everything he said, the reports, the filings. What you did, you were right. I didn't protect our son. I didn't protect you. I'm sorry. I didn't say thank you. I didn't owe him that. I need to know what comes next, he said. I want to be part of their lives. You can, I replied. But not as their fun parent, as their responsible parent. You earn your way back. Not to me, to them. He nodded slowly. And us. There is no us right now, I said. Maybe not ever again. But that doesn't mean we can't both be better people for our kids. That was the most honest conversation we'd had in years. No apologies layered with expectations. Just truth. That weekend, I took the kids out for dinner, just the three of us. Maya made a toast with her lemonade. To Mom, she said. The toughest lawyer in Milwaukee. We laughed and I took a picture of them both. Not for social media. Not for proof. Just for me. I didn't expect rebuilding my life to feel this calm. I thought it would be full of dramatic declarations, grand decisions, burning bridges. Instead, it was small choices made daily that changed everything. I started waking up earlier, not out of obligation, but because I wanted to. I took walks with the kids before school, helped David with his physical therapy exercises, and read Maya's essays like they were the most important legal documents I'd ever hold. I stopped waiting for people to recognize my worth and began acting like it was already obvious. When I returned to work as a full-time associate, my name appeared on the door of a small office next to the senior counsel's. It was barely big enough for 2 chairs and a bookshelf, but it was mine. The first thing I did was hang a framed photo of me and the kids at my graduation dinner, just the three of us finally smiling. No staged smiles, no forced family unity, just us. One afternoon, I received an unexpected email from the State Bar Association. They were hosting a women in law panel and wanted me to speak about navigating career and family under pressure. At first, I hesitated. Who was I to advise anyone? But then I remembered the nurse in the hospital, the young woman who took my outreach class, and every tired mother sitting in her car outside a night school classroom, wondering if it was worth it. I said yes. The day of the panel, I wore the same navy dress from graduation, now properly altered and zipped without rush. I looked into the crowd of mostly women most older than me and saw recognition in their faces before I spoke a word. I told them the truth. That sometimes the people who should clap for you won't even show up. That love doesn't always mean support. That motherhood and ambition are not opposites. That being strong doesn't mean never being angry. It means knowing what to do with the anger. After the talk, a woman in her 60s came up to me. "I waited until I was 52 to go back to school," she said. "Your story made me feel like I'm not crazy for trying again." I hugged her, not because I was trying to inspire, but because I understood. A month after the panel, I got a letter from the disciplinary board. Zach's company was officially fined and placed under administrative supervision for misuse of charitable funds. He wasn't going to jail, but the shame would stain his brand for years. My mother called to complain. "You've humiliated this family." "No," I said calmly. I finally defended myself, like I was trained to do. She said nothing. I didn't fill the silence. That was the final test, and I passed it. For David's birthday, I took the kids to a water park. We ate funnel cakes and stayed up past bedtime. I watched them laugh in the splash zone, and I knew I had broken the cycle. They would grow up knowing what it looked like when someone refused to be erased. That night, as we packed up to leave, David turned to me. "When I grow up, I want to be like you," he said, "even if it means fighting." I smiled, especially if it means fighting, and I meant it. There's a kind of peace that comes not from everything being perfect, but from knowing that you've survived the worst version of events and still found your footing. That's what my life became. Not the storybook ending I once dreamed of, but a grounded, earned sense of balance. I didn't reconcile with my mother. She still sends holiday cards, sometimes handwritten with guilt masked as politeness, but I no longer open them expecting warmth. I keep boundaries firm. Derek, to his credit, remained distant, but no longer antagonistic. He stopped posting showy updates online after the public fallout from his company's involvement with Zach. It was as if his spotlight dimmed naturally, and for the first time, he stopped trying to steal mine. Luke slowly rebuilt his role as a father. He started showing up to therapy sessions with David, attended Maya's science fair without excuses, and texted me updates about the kids without passive-aggressive undertones. We were no longer husband and wife, but we were functional co-parents. That was enough. At work, I began mentoring younger interns. One of them reminded me of myself too, eager, too hard on herself, too used to being invisible. I told her what no one had told me at the start. You don't have to wait for someone to give you permission to matter. She cried. I didn't. Not because I wasn't moved, but because I had already done my crying. Now I built. I taught. I defended. Graduation was never just about a degree. It was about claiming space in a world that often pretends you don't exist. It was about standing up even when no one's clapping because you know what it cost to get there. And while my ceremony ended with empty seats, it sparked a full life. One I designed on my own terms. My story didn't go viral. There was no Hollywood adaptation, no viral tweet. But every time I walk into a courtroom, every time my daughter raises her hand in class with confidence, every time my son hugs me without shame, I feel the impact. Not loud, but deep. And sometimes I still look at the photo on my office desk, the one of me alone in my cap and gown, smiling with tears still drying on my face. It reminds me that silence isn't always absence. Sometimes it's the quiet right before you take back your power. So if you're listening to this, wondering if it's too late, too hard, too lonely, let me tell you, you are worth the seat. You are worth the applause. And even if no one shows up, show up for yourself. That's how revolutions begin. One woman, one moment, one refusal to be invisible ever again.